Well, good evening. Anabolic University, Episode 2. Advanced Testosterone Material. And we're back. So, going over testosterone. Alright, so, what is testosterone? Remember how I told you I wouldn't show you functions? I lied. Structure and functions, bitches. Here it comes. Alright. So, got parent testosterone at the top, and I don't know if you can see that shit, but there's a double bond right there at position 4. My finger's blocking it. Position 4, can you see me? Right there, double bond. Right here on dihydrotestosterone, no double bond. And then over here on estradiol, there's an alcohol group, not a ketone. That's the difference. This is the filled in structure. This is after the electron cloud's been filled in. The white would be the hydrogen. The oxygen would be the black tip. These red blobs are the carbons in their shells. So this is what the molecule would actually look at if you could see electron clouds. And then here's tren. I want you to notice that tren has the same 4' double bond. It's not reduced like dihydrotestosterone. There is no scientific reason to believe that tren cannot be converted into dihydrotren or ultra-angry tren. I want you to think about that for a minute. So everything you've been told about tren and how it can't convert into DHT, I just showed you the structure. It's not like, how do you fuck that up? Sorry. Just like think it through for a minute here. Like, the fundamental principles of everything you thought you knew are proven false instantly. And there's nothing, unless the book's wrong. You know, like, what's more likely? The dude in the gym with no education's wrong, or the textbook's wrong? You know, I look like a dude in a gym, I get that. But we know that I'm, what do you call it, a slightly erudite dude in the gym. Ooh, so, testosterone, what are my notes? Because I know I don't want to waste your time. Endocrinology. Let's go over that really quick. A lot of people don't get this. Specifically, I think a lot of women don't get this, and that's why they take anabolic steroids. We're all started as women. We started as female fetuses. The female is the primary human. Someone's calling me while I'm doing the video. The female is the primary human. And the Y chromosome contains the SRY gene. And the SRY gene produces testosterone. And dihydrotestosterone, as I showed you, is the fully reduced, maximally male form of testosterone. And that, when it binds to certain tissues, causes differentiation from female tissues to male tissues. The Wolffian duct becomes the Mullerian duct. And one duct turns into the other duct. Penises are created from vaginas and shit like that. So let me ask you this. If a female tissue is like a blank slate and you throw DHT to it and it instantly turns into man, then wouldn't you think if a woman took testosterone, she'd turn into a man? Wouldn't a clitoris start to grow into a penis? Well, most women know that if they take steroids, they'll get a deep voice, an Adam's apple, hairy lips, masculine fit brow, and they might get a larger clit. Why does it not occur to anyone that if testosterone makes a clit bigger, why do they think that it would make a dick smaller? Like, how fucking stupid is that? Now, from a woman's point of view, or a homosexual man's point of view, if it's never hard, it's smaller. So there we come into certain side effects and the effects. Okay, so since it's a male sex hormone, testosterone is one of the necessary components for the male sex act. So if someone was taking anabolic steroids and was to shut off their natural production, then the steroids don't function like testosterone if they're using just anabolic steroids. Like, let's say they're just using Tren and Masteron or something like that, and they didn't use Test. Well, I mean, I'm sure lots of guys can get hard-ons like that. I don't know any who... I don't ask. Let's just put it that way. When I get problems come at me, the problems aren't smart problems usually. They're usually like, why did you do that, dude? You know, and it's like, oh, because you didn't know what you're doing. That's why. If you knew what you're doing, you wouldn't have done it. So not having Test on board means your dick's probably not going to work. Now, just taking anabolic steroids doesn't shut off your dick completely. It doesn't shut off natural testosterone production completely, but it shuts it down a lot. So if testosterone gets you aroused, and being aroused makes you hard, and when you're hard, you're bigger, then not being aroused and not having a sex drive means even if you were to try to force a hard-on, it ain't going to be full size. So that's where technically steroids will make your dick smaller, is that it doesn't reach maximally hard size if you get your chemistry wrong. You can also make it right, and it's bigger than it would ever be without the stuff. That's where people run into problems, is they don't know what they're doing. Well, that's not good. So, this is injection time. For an athlete, we're going to peak about 2 to 3 days. We'd want to re-inject about 4 or 5 days, right? Right? Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that after a certain point, this tail can go on for weeks, months, days. The area under the curve of this tail really doesn't do shit. There's a certain threshold. Let's say it's here. Your testosterone has to be above 700 level in the blood to grow muscle. Once it drops below that, it's irrelevant. So having a payload that delivers late, if you're not stacking them with multiple injections so that you can mount the peaks on top of each other so they can get higher than this point. Like if you injected right here and go bloop, right up there, right? So it's under the curve here, but if you do your injection on the second day, bloop, it's right up there. So this would be an injection every 4 days. If we're using anaphate is here. This would be, let's say it's Sustanon, right? Well, Sustanon, if you're using 250 of Sustanon, would have spiked higher, right? So this would be a lower dose. So, so if you're doing like Sustanon every 2 days, it would pop up here and then pop up here, and you'd be able to hit steady state concentration faster. You'd be above this 700 threshold. Let me write that 700 in so you guys know that's what I'm talking about right now. We're gonna make it a French. We're gonna make it a French 7. Give it a mustache. All right, so people are like, what the fuck's a French 7? I went to private school when I was 4. I learned how to do. All right, so that being said, once we get all the levels above 700, that's where you're going to grow muscle tissue. So obviously I can't have my head in between the light and board. And I'm trapping over guitar cases. Alright. So, tripping, not trapping. I'm trapping over the guitar cases. Alright, so 700 level. I've said that like 11 times. What's the point of that? So you want to stay above that. So you don't want to inject a location that takes forever to clear, right? So let's draw this out. If I do the delt with 1 ml, it's 56%. That looks like shit. I gotta write this differently. Let me pause it. Okay, so right here, we got the delt, 1 ml in the delt, 56% absorption. So if cypionate's already 63% real, that means 200 milligrams of cypionate is really only 120 milligrams of test absorbable. 56% absorption means you're getting 60, right? About 60, 70. So out of that 200 milligrams of test you got from the doctor, if you do this shot in your shoulder, it's only 70 milligrams that you're getting. Now if you do the glute 1 ml, you get 78%. Now testosterone is 250 at 73%, which is basically 180. So if you shot yourself in the ass with 180, you'd be looking at 120. So basically, the dickweeds who get SIP and inject in their shoulder, for 1 cc of SIP in the shoulder, you're getting 70 into your blood. For purposes of what actually helps you get above that dotted line, you're getting 70. For shit that, because the spike is in a reasonable time period. It's a slower time period because it's a smaller muscle. You get a faster spike and you can get higher above that level. More gets absorbed that's usable with the larger muscle and the smaller bolus. When you go with a larger bolus, what you're doing is you're taking this spot, like this is the muscle, and you stick this in here. This 1 milliliter cylindrical, it's really a bolus, it's a blob, but I can't really show you as easily like this, right? So it's, by me putting this here, I've pushed my hand apart, right? My fist has now gotten bigger because this volume occupies the space of this fist. So now this is compressing this muscle. If I was to put this other dry erase pen in here, now this is even bigger. So as I'm expanding this object, it's a liquid object, but it's an object because it's forming a ball that's the size of a golf ball that gets up to the size, let's say it goes from the size of a marble to the size of a golf ball if you go from 1 to 5 cc's. Well, obviously, if you're pushing with 5 cc's, it's going to be more force than 1, which means that there's more pressure on the sides of this ball. And I'm like, people are like, what the fuck are you talking about, Todd? I'm saying that if you take tissue, a muscle like this, and you try to blow it up with liquid inside, you're pushing on the inside of that muscle. So it's compressing it. So the vessels that would do the exchange with this big pocket of oil to absorb out the active drug can't get access to it because it's pushing on it. It's like if you've got a lower back pump, your lower back hurts, right? It's not because you hurt your lower back. You've got a lot of blood in between fascia and bone, and it's crushing the pain nerve right up against the bone. The more pump, the more pain. So if you pump your ass full of oil, it's going to push on the outside of it. Less is going to get absorbed. So obviously a tiny muscle like the delt is not going to absorb as much oil as quickly as some giant muscle like your ass. You don't even use your delt that much. You use your ass every step you take, you use your ass. So that's why you use smaller injections in larger muscles. But people are like, well, I got to use 3 cc's. So do 3 1 cc's injections. Pull the needle out and put it back in, walking up and down your ass cheek. Duh. And people are like, I never thought of that. It's like, that's the beauty of never going to other people for help, just using books, is then you can creatively come up with ideas and try them out. You don't have a boss, a daddy, or a coach to then have to get permission from anybody. And if you're already a doctor and the other doctors say, Todd, there's nobody who knows this stuff, not even the head of U of M as much as you. This is like 7 years ago when I just got started. It's like, we want your help. When doctors close the door and they're like, Todd, can you tell me how to make my penis bigger? Then you're like, shit, you can't go to anyone for help. You gotta figure this shit out, because there's a whole planet full of people who need your help, and there's no one there for them but you. So we covered an advanced test, the structures, and basically went over it. I talked about before, like dihydrotestosterone is made from testosterone by the action of 5-alpha reductase, right? I talked about that. Well, here it is. This is the 4' position. That's the 5' position. You can't really see it. This is the 4' position. That's the 5' position. Here it's reduced at position 5 because they added. You know what's funny is this thing won't zoom. They added a hydrogen to position 5, so it broke the double bond at position 4. Can you like click on this fucking thing to make it zoom or something? Alright, and then down here, the estrogen's got 3 rings, but you notice that there's no double bond. It's not a ketone group, it's an alcohol group. That's because aromatase comes along and breaks this double bond and forms all these double bonds, making a benzene ring with an alcohol group coming off, rather than just normal ring with an ketone group coming off. This changes the electronegativity dramatically of this and makes this highly reactive. So it binds to the estrogen receptor complex, which is different from the testosterone receptor complex. And I have a little chart here for you to show you what I'm talking about. If I can find it. Nope. And it's really cool because the estrogen receptor complex binds to a place that codes for DNA different from the other ones. The mineralocorticoids, I can't find it. The glucocorticoids and the androgens all have the same basic receptor. There's just slight variations. So there's only a 50% similarity between testosterone and cortisol. They're both steroids. Cortisol breaks down muscle, testosterone builds muscle. They bind almost identical. So if testosterone binds to the wrong receptor, you've got problems. That's why Anavar burns fat. That's why Tren builds muscle. That's why they both burn fat, build muscle, is that they bind to the cortisol receptor and foobar it. So it doesn't work anymore. So now cortisol can't bind to its own receptor. Winstrol's special ability, the reason why it makes you so dry, is that it stops cortisol from even being released. So even though they bind to the same basic heat response element on the DNA that causes DNA transcription translation, some of them are activatory, some of them are inhibitory. So the androgen receptor binding the androgen receptor complex, then forming a high homodimer with another molecule, then binds to the heat response element for IGF-1 and activates it, whereas glucocorticoid could bind to the glucocorticoid receptor, bind to that same heat response element for IGF-1 and deactivate it. So simply activating the motherfucker prevents the other one from deactivating it. Simply having shit that's androgenic inhibits cortisolic function. That a lot of the anti-glucocorticoid function of the androgens are simply because the motherfuckers made it to the heat response element faster. So when you have two opposing teams running for the same flag, making one team faster intrinsically makes the other team slower. Having a football team that has 15 people on it and the other one has 5, and you have to, we're going to take one person and move them over to the 15-person team. You don't have 5 and 16 now, you have 4 and 16. So the more you beef up the anabolic system, the more you inhibit the catabolic system. So the more cortisol and glucocorticoids you put in the system, the more it cancels out androgens. So don't think of estrogen being anti-testosterone, because they don't really compete for the same spot. Estrogen's got its own heat response element. What testosterone competes with glucocorticoids in a final battle of anabolic versus catabolic. Anabolism versus catabolism. And you know, our anabolic hormones are androgens, insulin, IGF-1, growth hormone, glutamine, branch chains, and a bunch of MGF, and a bunch of other obscure shit I've never covered. The catabolic ones are like myostatin, IGF-1, GH, glutamine, branch chains, beta-adrenergics, stretch and contraction. So using the muscle, stretching the muscle. The beta-adrenergics, that's an indirect thing. Prostaglandin F2 alpha. That's enough for one video about the super advanced promises of testosterone. I'm sure I can think of some other stuff that would be useful to you. This is Dr. Todd Lee.